Today I'm in the upper reaches of the Clydesdale Valley. Carlisle is about 50 miles to the south. Glasgow another 40 miles to the northwest. This is where the Clydesdale Valley narrows into what is known as the Mennock Pass. It was a main travel area for centuries. Dating back to Roman times, 80 AD to the year 170 AD, this was a Roman fort, and it was garrisoned with about 300 Roman troops. In the year 1175, a motte and bailey castle was built here by the Crawford family. In 1215, half the barony was taken over by the Lindsay family. And at this famous castle, Crawford Castle, or Tower Lindsay, as it may have been called then, it was subjected to a raid by the notorious and none other than William Wallace. Because this was a main transport area, it was an important place, and it changed hands many times during the Scottish Wars of Independence. It's many years since I've been here, and I've been here many times in the past. Usually, I've come late in the year, and just getting yourself through the undergrowth with nettles which are neck high. No exaggeration, they are neck high. It can be quite a difficult place to penetrate, but it's a beautiful old ruin. Many pass it, many don't see it from the road, but it has a great tale to tell of the outlaw William Wallace. And this whole Clydesdale region would have been the routes, some of the routes south, where they performed southern raids, and also their return route as Wallace made his way to Lanarkshire. The River Clyde is a very imposing river, and there are some great stretches of the Clyde, and I've walked many of them throughout the years. As a young boy, we used to play when we went to Lanarkshire down near the River Clyde, where there's incidentally also a Wallace cave. But we're always told to be careful because the Clyde holds many hidden depths. And when the river is in spate, it can be quite an intimidating place. But the Clyde runs through some beautiful country. And back in medieval times, outlaw country.
So this Motte Bailey Castle protects the route from England into the upper Clyde Valley. And the grass is lovely, it's short, and it really hasn't had the chance yet to get long and for the weeds to take over the place. But here we are walking up now the slope of this Motte Bailey. I love this old ruin. I can remember the very first time I came here, and the weather was horrid. It really was a horrid place, and I literally got stung multiple times over and over, but that didn't stop me investigating this old place. We're going to take a look at the old stone here. This is a marvellous old ruin. Now, back in William Wallace's time, this is a later building. These additions are late additions, but this would have been, just look at the view that you get here. Such a commanding view over the land. And the River Clyde below. But this is a beautiful old ruin. The ruins here are mostly 16th and 15th century. Some of the foundations that were built after the Scottish Wars of Independence will still be here. And it's such a pleasure just to walk through this when it's like this, unopposed. Listen to the cack of the crows. Beautiful. If you like exploring old castles that are not under care, that are left to time, and who give that atmosphere of lost history, Crawford Castle or Tower Lindsay, whatever your preference, certainly fits that bill. Now to the story
of William Wallace. William Wallace had come up the Clyde Valley. Now, this is all from Blind Harry. These are traditional stories that have been passed down historically through them. Some are conjecture, some I believe have many truths and half-truths. But the story is that Wallace was on his way back after raiding down at Lochmaben in Dumfriesshire, in Annandale. And Wallace had about 40 men with him, including John de Graham, his right-hand man, and his third in command, a William Crawford. Now it's interesting to note that Wallace's mum, Margaret, was a Crawford. She was married to the chief of the family Crawford. So Crawfords very much associated with this area. At this point, somewhere between Christmas 96 and spring 97, Wallace and his band of men came upon this castle in the dark hours. What they heard inside was revelry. The English garrison, the soldiers, were having a good time. They weren't suspecting anything. Sir John de Graham took a torch, a burning ember, and he cast it onto the rafters, and it took to the flames. The place was burnt. Some of those soldiers, no doubt, being burned inside. You can just picture the screams and the surprise and the confusion as Wallace and his men were outside circling the place. For those who weren't put to the flame and who survived, Wallace almost certainly hanged them outside from the trees or the wooden parapets. This was a strike by William Wallace at English authority. This was a very important area, and the reason it changed hands so many times is because of the supply wagons coming up the River Clyde here. So it was an important place to target. Wallace really on the loose at this stage. And interesting to note that he had 40 men. And Sir John de Graham there. Sir John de Graham eventually, he was Wallace's right-hand man. He would fall in battle at Falkirk. And William Crawford, as Wallace's third in command, would eventually take his place. But I used to imagine here just what it would be like with a all-round timber palisade in here. Possibly a garrison of 15, 20 English soldiers. Drunk into the late hours, midnight and after. And then all of a sudden, the smoke from the embers, the wood catching flames. Some going outside to investigate, taking arrows or chests or spears to the chest, being cut down, confusion, some coming back inside. They may have well boarded them up and burned them alive. Wallace was certainly capable of that. Or he may have taken a couple of survivors out, held them prisoner for a very short time before they had their way with them. But this was a significant strike at the authority of King Edward I. Another name that would come to be associated with Crawford Castle would be the Carmichael family. The Carmichaels of Meadowflat, for they would become hereditary constables of this castle throughout many years. But it really is such a beautiful place. This is probably the best weather day that I've had while visiting this area. With the majority of the lesser castles in medieval times being built with timber, they were a natural target for arson, for attacks with fire. For me, I don't think there could be a worse death than being confined in a place, boarded up, and set to flames. Hopefully, the smoke would get you before the flames did. But such is the nature of war. War takes no prisoners. War is brutal in any age. But back in medieval times, where, in comparison to modern day medieval warfare, although sophisticated in many parts, guerrilla warfare, rudimentary in many ways, but that didn't make it any less effective. They would use whatever they could find, whatever could be put to use. It's amazing when the human mind is put under that kind of pressure, what they can come up with. Many forts would have been put to the flames, only to be rebuilt, until the stone castle took over. And such was Bruce's policy, to tear them down so that they could not be occupied, inhabited, and used as seats of power by the enemy ever again. It's a fabulous example of a Motte and Bailey castle. And it's a place that is stuck full of stories, tales and legend. And it's a place that should be on your bucket list if you intend to visit Scotland. And if you're on the trail of William Wallace. This is an especially nice place to visit, because largely the countryside around it is unchanged in many ways. Yes, we have the odd house here, but we have the windmills out in the hill, but the lead hills are notoriously bare, and not everywhere was covered in deep forest back in medieval times. Forests could be large expanses of open ground, open heath, and it would include that, but you get a real sense of time when you come here. You can just imagine William Wallace and his 40 men coming up that valley, hearing the noise from inside here, knowing that the castle was here, knowing that it was garrisoned by English soldiers, and with that element of surprise during the night, using that and taking them by surprise. The less modern development that is around the place. I've disturbed a dog over there. That happened many times in Scottish history. I forget the incident, but someone had disturbed a dog and their invasion of the castle or someone's camp had been foiled. Not uncommon. But when you wade through these old ruins, there's probably stone falls from here year after year. There's risk. They're old, they're dangerous, they're unstable. But there's the taste. Watching my footing here. There's the taste of adventure. There's the taste of walking back in time. And that is what it's all about. And you get that here. There are many old castles in Scotland dating back to ancient times that are tucked away, untouched, and well worth the visit, because they do give you an experience. As I say, I've been here many times, but each time has its own unique experience, and it sets your imagination on fire. It sets your mind to work, and once you get away from reading the dusty old history books and you start to breathe it in, you start to walk the ground and you start to feel it. That's what it's all about, and that's what history gives us, and that's why it's so important to have places like this that we can come to, dig out the old maps, visit these obscure ruins that have a story to tell. This is Crawford Castle, otherwise known as Tower Lindsay. In 1320, the Lindsays would attach their name to the Declaration of Arbroath. By the 18th century, this place would become disused, and the stone would be used to build the local farmhouse. I just feel privileged and happy that this remains, and it gives us somewhere to go and experience the stories that we read about. That's when the stories have a heartbeat and a pulse. That's when we breathe life into them. Thank you for walking in the footsteps with me, folks.